I was just looking back through the archives, and it was April last year when we were all sat above a bookshop in Leeds, and you were there, John, and Gary Schofield was there. And we were talking about the retirement of Greg Inglis.
We need to pay tribute, and we've got the right man here to do that. Greg Inglis retired this morning from Rugby League.
Still can't get over the
32 years old.
Yes.
Player of the a player of the generation. I don't know from your perspective of how you saw him develop, but seeing him over here as the fully fledged player that we did, one of the greatest I've seen. You know, the phrase is used a lot, men against boys. He always was that for me. I mean, Australia will miss him, Queensland will miss him, South Sydney will
England
miss him.
won't miss him.
We won't. But another shining light has been diminished.
As a New South Welshman, I won't miss him because he should have been playing for New South Wales because he was born and raised there. But that's another issue. No, I mean, I agree completely. I was actually thinking about this, listening to a podcast on my way in, another podcast, and thinking about Sco. I mean, he in a way, he's been another Meninga. Different in some ways, but the physical presence, the fend, you know, I mean, you played against Mal, and
but also to Mal's partner in crime, G Miles as well. Yeah. So Greg, he's been a freak of rugby league player, and you will put him in Meninga's.
I think you've got to. I don't think he's an immortal.
No, he's not. He's in that bracket.
All-time great.
He's in that
he
bracket.
Was unplayable.
He's in that bracket. We Mal. No, he won't be an immortal, but he's in that. You can put him in that bracket with Mal and G Miles without a doubt. But also as well, when you look at the Australian centres, you can put him there as well. The same with Mick Crone and Steve Rogers. Yeah. You know, this is how good.
But he also
did
it at fullback as well.
And at 6, I can remember him in a grand final. I think it was 2007. They might have been cheating the cat, but we won't talk about that. But he was playing at 6 for Melbourne, you know, and that was a Melbourne team with a much younger Billy Slater, Cameron Smith, before Coop gone. He was playing at 6, and you know, he was a ball runner. He wasn't a distributor, but he was devastating at 6.
Exactly, and also with the size of man again, it's exactly like Big Gene and Big Mal. What pace did he have? He had no issues going 60, 70, 80 yards whatsoever. Simply a freak of a rugby league player. He will be sadly missed. Absolutely sadly missed.
Probably 2014, apart from all the Origin tries and the Australian internationals, 2014, winning that grand final with Sam Burgess at South. I mean, 43 years. The Bunnies had to wait. That's probably too.
I was lucky enough to present him with a golden boot at Ellen Road in 2009 when he became the best player in the world, and rightly so from there. So I don't think there'll be any argument of Greg Inglis being with the greatest Australian rugby league.
Yeah, sad to see him, forced out by injury.
What's he been forced for? Just niggling injuries.
His shoulder, I think, is the main. He's had issues, body issues. I think it's just as Phil said, there's like men against boys, and I think now he's coming back to the field and he's not that dominant force because his body is letting him down. I think it's 16 or 15 years that he's.
Do you know what? As well, then fair play to him for being open and honest to say, listen, I can't take it anymore. You know, he might still enjoy going to training, he might still enjoy the playing, but what he's realised is now, even though he's only 32. I tell you what, some of these boys, a lot younger than me. You look at the size of these fellas from there. Yeah, fair play to him, but
and he's going to stay involved in the sport because he's been a fantastic ambassador for the Indigenous.
Hey, that's what the Aussies do, don't they? They keep the greats of the game, don't they?
Yeah, South's going to look after him.
He's come back for the challenge, obviously, of playing in Super League. We know what the word challenge means. He's off to the Warrington Wolves. Phil, are we excited?
I think we should be. It's just really interesting that it's come at a time when we're talking about perhaps decreasing the salary cap. You know, how are we going to in future not only attract the great stars but retain the ones that we've got? And as we start the debate that it should be lessened for next year, Warrington pull another rabbit out of a hat and bring a name that is more recognisable than just Super League, which is clearly what marquee signings are all about. And whether they're paying him marquee money or not, the debate should now be around, do we actually need a salary cap, or do we need people like Greg Inglis coming over and playing in our competition? I think it fills an obvious hole for Warrington on their playing staff. I think I'd be surprised if Anthony Gelling plays too many more games for them, and I think Luther Burrell's future is in the second row if he's got one. So he's the right signing in the right position. I think it's great for the competition. If he'd have been there unveiled at the start of the season alongside the Maloneys and the Sonny Bill Williams, we'd have been going, wow, this is the best intake we've ever had. So yes, it's a good news story, and the parlour state that we're in at the moment, any big name signing is a good signing.
John, how fit is he going to be, bearing in mind that he retired last year because of injury?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the talk is that he didn't actually retire because of injury, but because he felt he couldn't play to the same high standards. So it was more to do with mental health. And I think he's come out and sort of confirmed that he's bipolar, and he's obviously faced battles with depression before. So he has had shoulder and I think knee issues. I think that the thing it'll be 2 years he'll been out of the game, so he'll be 34 in January. And I can't think of a player in recent times who's been out of the game, perhaps not without a drug ban, who's come back. I think Gareth Ellis was 18 months, obviously a bit different when you're a middle. So yeah, it's going to be a fair challenge for him. But I mean, if he can get back fit and mentally he's right, obviously he's probably a future immortal and one of the all-time greats. So it's definitely a win on the publicity marketing side for Super League, because he is a genuine big name.
Tom, you've got a website to run. Surely a name like Greg Inglis is going to drive traffic to Forty20.news.
Oh, absolutely. There was certainly a mad scramble the day that was announced. My co-editor Tom was messaging me backwards and forwards. We had a text message saying, "Have you seen the reports in Australia?" And less than an hour later, it was confirmed on social media by Warrington. So it was definitely a huge announcement from Warrington, and as the guys have said, it's a name that transcends rugby league across the world. There aren't many bigger names in rugby league circles than Greg Inglis, and with what he's managed to achieve at club and state representative level, it certainly could be an extremely good buy for Warrington if, as John says, he can get himself physically fit. But it will certainly be very interesting to see next year.
He's a bums on seats name as well, because it's not just about what he'll do for Warrington. Clearly, they can see a need to fit him into their setup at the moment, but take him to virtually every other ground, and you're almost guaranteed home interest. Pick Leeds, for example. If you could go and see Conrad Hurrell up against Greg Inglis, that's the kind of admission money you might be prepared to pay. So yeah, I think it's a win-win. I just think the timing's really interesting as well, because at a time when virtually the bulk of clubs are starting to say we need to spend less, Warrington, who are firmly in the camp of we need to spend the same or be seen to be spending more, have gone out and spent more anyway. So it does his signing signal the end of the salary cap.
I just want to ask you, John.
Sure.
Phil mentions timing there, John. Was it your Aussie brethren in the media who kind of pushed the announcement from Warrington of his signing?
Yeah, I think it was the Daily Telegraph in Sydney that broke the story, and Sydney Morning followed up. And I spoke to Carl Fitzpatrick later on, and they basically, they had I think it was a day later they were going to announce it, so they had to rush to get it. But I think the news basically shocked everyone in rugby league because it kind of came out of the blue. I think everyone expected that was it from Greg. He doesn't have anything else to prove. I don't know how many grand finals he's won, 4 or 5. He's won a World Cup. He's won Origins. So it's an interesting one. How he adapts to Super League, living in the UK. He's coming over in December, so it's going to be a little bit colder than what he's used to in Sydney. But as Phil said, I think it's really interesting with Warrington, because you look at the last, say, 4 signings. Obviously, Luther Burrell was a big profile. He hasn't, flown in Super League, but he's a high-profile signing who got a lot of media attention. Obviously, being in England, Rugby Union International, and Gareth Widdop and Blake Austin. So they're sort of on a one-man, one-club mission to put Super League in the headlines.
Yeah. Carl Fitzpatrick made it very clear, didn't he, in terms of spending, etc. He said that he was very quick to say that he wasn't coming for the money. I suppose it'd be hard to argue against that, really. Somebody in Greg Inglis's situation, like John says, nothing to prove. He's the wrong side of 30, and he's had physical battles to try and get himself ready. Obviously feels he's physically ready to come back now, and Warrington already have 2 marquee players on their salary cap. So it would be interesting to see. I would still expect there'd probably be some players to leave Warrington at the end of the season, but maybe he's not coming on the big paycheck that everybody thinks that's associating with the high profile of his name.
There is a historical precedent for that. in Danny Baderas. When he came to Leeds, everybody assumed that he would be coming on the kind of money that he could have commanded at his absolute height at Newcastle. And he actually approached Leeds and said, I want to come for the cultural experience. So clearly, I'm not coming for nothing, but I don't need to be one of your highest paid players because I'm told that your competition is something that you need to experience. I've been over here on kangaroo tours. I've just had the most fantastic time in the city. I want to finish my career by saying I've been part of something. And as it happened, he ended up leaving with a winner's medal in the grand final. I reckon Inglis is in a similar mould, that he doesn't need to do this for the money, but there's something still, a tiny little piece of the jigsaw of being a professional rugby league player that says, I could be one of the few people that maybe won a grand final on both sides of the world, to which the smart ass in the background says, why is he joining Warrington then? Ha, ha, ha. But I just think there's a wider debate here about, do we actually need a salary cap? And again, I only mention it because clearly there's been some debate by some chairmen who want to see it reduced for next year. Now, firstly, I think that's a terrible look for Super League. Every sport's going to be in a rebuilding phase, and we're all going to have to pay a bit of bravado to get people back and believing in the product that they're coming back to is as good, if not better, than the one that they left. And if pounds are hard earned in the early part of next year, why should they buy a season ticket? Well, I think if you're already putting out that message that we're going to be a slightly lesser product because we're not going to spend as much money, then you're starting on that really slippery slope to saying we're not going to be as good. So I think there's no minimum to this salary cap. This is the bit I've never understood. That if it was a minimum requirement to spend the 2.1 million, and all of the clubs wanted to say, actually, we're not going to have 2.1 million, we'll lower that, you could make a sense of it. But as they don't have to spend it currently anyway, A, why do you need to mention that you're lowering it? And B, why do you need to have one at all now?